So why do I generally recommend training to failure versus maybe training 1, 2, or even 3 reps in reserve? One of the bigger challenges that most trainees will face is that they've never actually been to failure in the first place. So trying to gauge what 1, 2, or even 3 reps in reserve is most times really turns into like 4 or 5, even 6 plus reps in reserve. So by me generally recommending going to failure, my hopes is that it's actually getting folks really close to a true 1 or 2 reps in reserve. And if they even do get to failure, that's great, because then you'll learn what failure feels like. So now if you are following a program that does have a reps in reserve prescription, you'll know what an actual 1 or 2 reps in reserve is, or you'll actually know what a real failure set is. That way, it's just easier for you to gauge over time. Now, before someone brings up safety or overtraining or injury, just don't even worry about that in this context. I'm not saying don't worry about not getting injured and stuff like that, but far too often, trainers will associate injuries and overtraining with effort solely, and that's just not the case. When it comes to overtraining and injuries and all those variables, it's way more complex than simply saying, oh, if you just train to failure, you're going to get injured and overtrained. It doesn't work like that. And most times, honestly, just from experience, from hearing other people's stories, one of the more common denominators in folks getting injured and overtrained is actually really more closely related to the amount of work that you're doing rather than the effort of work. So if you are lifting with control, like I always recommend, and like any trainer should be recommending, is, lift with control. Don't throw, bounce, swing weights around and lift like a jackass. So if you're lifting with control and you are in control of the weight, there's not much to worry about when training to failure or getting close, like actually close, right? Like I said, most folks that say that they're training to 2 reps in reserve, it's really more like 5 plus most of the time. So if you are actually getting to a legit 2 reps in reserve, or even an absolute muscular failure set, if you are lifting with control and you are in control of that weight, you are miles and miles and miles more safe compared to someone who maybe is not lifting close to failure, but doing a lot more volume, throwing and bouncing and swinging the weights around. So as you can see, even that comparison there, it's just that there's so many more variables that go into potentially getting injured than your effort alone. So this is another reason why I definitely will say, hey, like, train as hard as you can, get as close to failure as you can. The exact number doesn't really matter, but you want to have a really hard set. So now, before this gets too far off topic, again, I just want to reiterate the reason why I'm saying train to failure, period, in a lot of the content, or when I'm training one-to-one clients or members within the hypertrophy WOD, is that most trainees who are doing a 2 or 3 rep in reserve, it's really more like 5 plus reps in reserve. And so we want to get as close to and even touch those failure points. That way we understand what it feels like, and that way we can actually do a legit 1 or 2 rep in reserve set if asked of us. And another thing too is there's going to be levels to this, meaning that if you're training by yourself and you do a 1 rep in reserve set, and it was a good set, right? There's nothing wrong with it. But as soon as you maybe get like a training partner with you, you're going to get another few reps, right? So there's always going to be levels to it. And so, again, that's another reason why when most people do a 1 or 2 rep in reserve set, it's going to be a little bit more than that. So, again, don't be afraid to push your efforts as long as you are lifting with control and you're doing the right amount of volume with those sets. You're going to be totally fine.